banking bill deals with a small part of this, but not what needs to be done. We need a broad, comprehensive bill.
Can I just say something on that?
Go ahead.
I'm telling you right now, if somebody tries in the Senate to do just a banking bill, they're going to make all the wealth and the money that is going after this already is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But what could become a even bigger industry, to just do it so some people can get rich and not do something about the people who are languishing with criminal convictions, not do something on restorative justice, not do something to make sure that the business opportunities are created are fairly given a fair playing field, where right now in many states, someone who has a criminal conviction for selling marijuana can't get a license now. I don't know about other members of the Senate, but I will lay myself down to do everything I can to stop an easy banking bill that's going to allow all these corporations to make a lot more money off of this, as opposed to focusing on the restorative justice aspects.
Well, there you go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Green Rush Live for Friday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young with Pro Cannabis Media.
And joined always, I shouldn't say always after what happened a few weeks ago, but David Rabinovitz, and I'm glad to be back.
And we're glad you're here. We are eagerly awaiting a regular on our show, Morgan Fox from Washington, D.C., NCIA's communications director. Needless to say, David, they've been a little busy breaking down the 163-page document that has been filed to decriminalize, if not legalize, cannabis in the United States of America. There's already been some pushback on the other side of the aisle, as they say, basically saying it's never going to get done. What's your immediate reaction to what you found out as far as what is being put out there in this bill? And you know the situation in Washington, D.C., as far as the Republicans on one side, the Democrats on the other side, 50-50 in the Senate, filibusters, blah, 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 politics.
Well, you know, there's always the adage in the marijuana sector that time moves like dog years, right? A month is equal to a year, or whatever the analogies are that people happen to use. But it's going very fast right now. I think I saw something over one of my news feeds today that Ohio's looking at legalizing. The legalization effort is gaining speed at an exponential level. Look in the last few months how many states have actually legalized. It's going very quickly. So I think while the Republicans may push back on it, at some point they're going to have to realize that they may be representing a state that has legalized it. But Kurt Dalton did a wonderful summary.
Who?
Kurt Dalton.
Cannabis.net's Kurt Dalton?
On cannabis.net, he did a great summary in an article he put together. MJ Biz had a really great breakdown. They went through all 163 pages. In fact, after reading those two articles, I didn't read them in great detail. I was going to read the whole 163 pages, and then I said, you know, maybe I don't even need to, because there's a lot of things in that bill that don't look good, and they're just poorly conceived. A 25% federal tax, just kill it out of the gate. You can make it expensive enough that you can say it's legal now, but then nobody's going to be able to sell.
Right. And the most important thing in this bill, and I think if you saw the beginning of this show, you saw Senator Cory Booker really making a great case about why this is a social justice bill more than it is any of the other details in this bill. And as we mentioned, we did expect Morgan Fox. He's never, ever disappointed us. And he joins us now live from Washington, D.C. He is the communications director of the NCIA. Earlier this week, I got a chance to talk to Michael Correa, who's the lead lobbyist and the head of the governmental relations. Needless to say, Morgan, have you guys spent the last 48 hours breaking down this 163-page document?
Yes, we have, and it's going to take a lot longer than that to really get into all of the details. We're also reaching out to our members and various stakeholders to get their input as well, so that we can submit comments in time to make sure that this bill is the best bill that it can possibly be.
Hey, Morgan, tell us about the new hat you've got on here.
This is a hat from my softball team, sponsored by an amazing organization in the DC area, Tacoma Wellness Center. They are a a medical cannabis dispensary in the DC area and have been just great about sponsoring our softball team over the last few years.
Interesting, David. I don't think cannabis companies in Massachusetts can sponsor softball teams.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't think they can. They have such limited marketing. And actually, that's a great segue, because the rest of this show, we're going to be talking about state politics in New Hampshire. We're going to be talking about billboards and the use of people's likeness on a billboard. As you might know, a Massachusetts dispensary was sued this week by Sacha Baron Cohen's legal team for using his likeness in his Borat character. And we covered that in our We Talk News, as always. That show will follow this one at 6 p.m. Eastern time. But now let's get back to this bill. Morgan, while David admits he's done a little bit more homework on this than I have, but I looked at the entire news conference that Senators Schumer, Booker, and Wyden held the other day. We're going to be using excerpts from it throughout this show. We led the show off with Senator Booker talking about the importance of it as a social justice bill more than anything else. David immediately goes to the bottom line, 25% tax. Oh, we can't have that. There are still elements in this bill that I believe will eventually move the needle forward. I don't know if you go in and expect everything. How do you guys decide what you're going to go for and what you don't?
Well, I mean, I think it's important overall to really look at this bill and see it for what it is, which is probably the most well-considered and well-thought-out cannabis descheduling bill that we've seen so far. Obviously, there are some things that probably need to get improved and some things that might need to get stripped out, but it's an excellent starting place, not only to, because there's so much emphasis on social justice, but there's also a much more robust regulatory structure, and we haven't seen that in other bills previously. And this is a great way to really start the conversation and be able to find areas of common ground across party lines, find where the sticking points are politically, and just go from there. The problem that I had with that press conference, which I'm sure that you covered with Mike previously, was the insinuation that comprehensive cannabis policy reform is mutually exclusive with incremental reform, and it absolutely is not. So that's something that we're going to be working on with lawmakers as well over the coming months.
So what you're saying, because Cory Booker got really upset when a question in that news conference related to the Safe Banking Act, and basically saying, we don't need the Safe Banking Act, we need the whole enchilada, it's time. I mean, he was pretty pissed, to be honest.
I mean, we do need the whole enchilada. That is not in question. What is in question is when. And, when we clearly do not yet have the votes for comprehensive descheduling, particularly comprehensive descheduling that includes the sort of robust reparative and social justice provisions that we need to see happen in such a bill. But we do have the votes for incremental reforms like safe banking that will have an immediate positive effect primarily on small and minority-owned businesses. There's no reason to be throwing these incremental reforms under the bus and closing the doors on it. I mean, when it comes right down to it, big businesses and MSOs already have access to banking. They already have access to capital. When you look at social equity businesses, their number one concern is access to capital and barriers to entry, such as the high costs and problems associated with not having banking issues. So the longer that we delay a narrowly tailored incremental reform like that, that just basically creates more opportunity for larger operators to cement their market position while small businesses continue to struggle and fail. And, clearly we want the same thing, but if we have the votes for something incremental, then we should absolutely pursue that along the lines, along with these more broad bills, so that we can help move the Overton window for comprehensive reforms farther along, but not leave small and minority-owned businesses behind. And there's I think a certain subsect of Democratic lawmakers that think that incremental reforms being passed will take the wind out of the sails of more broad reforms. And, we've seen historically in cannabis policy reform that that's just not the case. Every time an incremental reform bill passes and we can get somebody to vote on it, it makes it that much easier for that person to vote in favor of something that's more comprehensive. And, these things are not mutually exclusive. We can pursue them both.
Well, it sounds like you guys are going to be really busy for sure, because I think there's a lot of selling to be done in the halls of the Capitol. Just for yucks and giggles, I decided to check out the other side. Okay, because I think a lot of people think a lot of people know, let me rephrase that I lean to the left side. Okay, so I decided to read this right side review of the bill by a Kevin Williamson, headline, the marijuana reform we need, and then subheadline, and why we won't get it. He gave you two reasons, Republicans and Democrats. Michael mentioned this as well. That current situation that is in DC is unlike anything in my lifetime I've ever seen this divided. Maybe the 60s with the pro-war and anti-war, the doves and the hawks. But this is a time where people have to look at the broad picture, the big picture, and say, what can you live with? So, and David, you do more negotiations, certainly more successful ones than I have. And when you go into a negotiation, when you're looking to sell something, you go in with everything, and then you end up perhaps settling on something you can live with. Is that an accurate way of how the lobbying process works?
Well, everything is compromise, and politics is really just the art of the possible. So conversations around this are going to be ongoing. And when it comes to comprehensive reform, clearly members of the GOP have issues with the federal regulatory structure and I hate to say this, but a big sticking point is on like the restorative justice provisions, which I think, and I've mentioned before, Republicans are going to have to answer for at some point. But right now, I think that this bill really just embodies a good discussion point to kind of figure out where everybody is. But we are going to need to get past partisan rancor. And when you're talking purely politics, this is an issue that is broadly supported, but not very deeply supported by most voters. So, it's a clear win that would carry no serious backlash against any lawmakers on either side of the aisle for supporting. But I don't think that many of them are too worried that if they don't get something like this passed, that they're going to feel too much backlash in terms of reelection. So, it's the jobs of, activists and advocates to change their minds about that and to make sure that voters actually will hold them accountable for the decisions that they make or the inaction that they show on this issue. But when you come down to it, we're looking at a very short window before a potential change in control of both chambers of Congress, where because demographically Republicans tend to support this issue, at least among lawmakers, much less than Democrats, and really among voters, slightly less than Democrats. So we have until about the midterms to really get something substantive passed. At that point, if voters see that Democrats are unable to compromise on even something that's broadly supported, I think that there's going to be a serious effect on that, and it will endanger their ability to maintain control of either chamber. And if they lose control of one or both chambers, that is definitely going to slow down progress for comprehensive as well as incremental cannabis policy reform.
Michael, enlighten me. There's actually a public comment period between now and September 1st. I'm going to try and remember what the email is, but I'm pretty sure it's cannabis_reform at senate.finance.gov. Did I get it right?
I'm not sure, honestly. We're
send an email.
primarily.
It didn't bounce. I sent one. It didn't bounce. That's the one you're supposed to send it to. and it's in our news show too. So I'm sorry I put you on the spot there, pal.
Oh no, it's quite all right. But I mean, we're not ready to offer our opinions and analysis of it just yet. We want to be very thoughtful about it, just like the sponsors of the bill were very thoughtful and considerate when they were putting it together. And we want to engage as many of our members and stakeholders as possible before we start, giving our opinion on the details of the bill. Like I said, overall, it's looks pretty solid. There are definitely going to be some things that need to get changed. Just if you're looking at it historically, this is the first time that Senate Majority leadership has not only supported but sponsored something like this. So it's clearly a signifier of how far we've come over the last 5-10 years, and it really is just a matter of working out the details and making sure that lawmakers actually do what's best for their constituents.
We haven't had a chance to talk because we took a couple of weeks off for vacation, just time off. Judge Clarence Thomas threw out a written rant, I guess that would be, right? In social media, it would probably be on video, and they call it a rant. This was a 5-page opinion, and he called the federal federal laws as contradictory and unstable. Does that help going into the lobbying phase here of this bill?
I mean, rhetorically and symbolically, it absolutely does help. In terms of practicality, it would only help if the Supreme Court would take up cases related to cannabis policy, and they've been denying them sort of certiorari for the last couple of years. I believe probably because they figured the matter is settled after the Gonzalez v. Raich case in I want to say 2005.
2005.
David knows. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I think that most of them view the case matter as pretty much solved under the Commerce Clause, but the fact that a conservative justice is pointing out and taking the time out of his day to object to the status quo, I think symbolically is very important. In terms of what sort of an impact that can have, clearly it's good for rhetorical purposes, but for practical purposes, unless the Supreme Court actually takes up a case involving these issues, we're not going to see any direct impact.
Bear something. I want to add something in on that. In Justice Thomas's comments, he didn't reference the Gonzalez versus Raich case directly, but he said, a lot has changed since 2005, and that was the case he was talking about.
Right.
Like, that was a woman growing a bunch of plants in her house because the doctor told her to. Butte County Sheriff showed up along with the DEA. The sheriffs looked at her paperwork and said, "We're leaving," and the DEA said, "We ain't," and they confiscated her plants.
Yeah, and I mean, the ruling of that case was based on an interpretation of Commerce Clause that has been upheld in judicial precedent since, I believe, 1942 in like the Wickard v. Filburn wheat case. And so I think that the rulings that case was based on are probably not going to get overturned in any sense. But a creatively worded case challenging federal prohibition, I think, could potentially make it to the Supreme Court, provided that it's being done on grounds that haven't already been covered by existing precedent. That being said, I don't know if any such case would be able to make it to the Supreme Court before Congress actually deals with this issue, but it's totally worth a try.
Now, David is a scholar on the history of cannabis in this country. I've heard him speak before. He's critically acclaimed historian. Walk us through, because I don't think a lot of people know this, David, the Timothy Leary story from 1969 that ended up with a unanimous Supreme Court decision basically saying that Marijuana Act of 1937 was unconstitutional. Walk us through the history of this, David. It's fascinating.
So Timothy Leary, the tune
Wait, hang on. Morgan, you know this story, I hope, right?
I do. I don't know too many of the details about it because that was the shutdown of the Marijuana Tax Act, but
Right.
Was immediately followed by the passage of the Controlled Substances Act.
Exactly right. 69 and 73. Just for the record, I was 12, and 15. Okay, go ahead, David.
All right. So I think it's the Rolling Stones, at one of their songs, they say something about truth is
Timothy
always strange.
Leary's dead. Go ahead.
What's that?
I just sang the song.
Oh, okay.
But I want you to do the Supreme Court thing because I really think
Okay.
a lot of
Let
people
me know
don't
when,
know
Jimmy, 'cause
the
it's
history.
4:19.
Go ahead.
We got people in the chat that are they're packing their bowls and rolling their joints now for 420.
That's right.
So here's the readers, the highly condensed version. Timothy Leary, Harvard-trained psychologist, believes you can use LSD for therapeutic purposes. He's Mr. Tune in, turn on, and drop out. Decides he's taking his family on vacation. They're going to go down to Mexico. Well, they have a couple of joints in the bag. Not a big deal. They go past the border in Texas. They get to the Mexican side of the border, and their paperwork's not right. Mexicans tell them, sorry, you can't come in. They turn the car around, they drive back. The border guards in the US say, we got to check your bags. He says, no, you don't understand. We didn't go to Mexico. We just came through here. We went down, they turned us back. And the border guard says, we got to check your bags. He says, no. He says, we got to check your bags, sir. You went through, you want to come back, we check your bags. In the bags, they find a couple of joints. He gets arrested. He loses the case, appeals, loses the case. Remember, he's a Harvard psychologist, which means he's got money, right? He appeals it all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in May of 1969, his argument is pretty good. He says, look, marijuana is illegal in some states. In order to get the tax stamp, which I could readily get through the government under the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, I have to acknowledge that I have possession of marijuana, which is illegal. And that would incriminate my Fifth Amendment right. So under the Fifth Amendment, this whole law should be thrown out. And in fact, that's what SCOTUS came down in May of 1969 in a unanimous decision, ruled the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was illegal, whereupon marijuana was no longer illegal at the federal level. And then Nixon responded with the Comprehensive Drug, whatever it is, Act, including the controlled part of it was a Controlled Substance Act. But there was that short window where you could probably smoke pot in Washington, D.C. and get away with it.
Isn't that, now Morgan, I told you he knew all the details. I don't know if he hung out with Timothy Leary or not. But when you think about that, isn't there a great screenplay out there somehow that you just take away the Nixon White House and you live with legal cannabis in 1969? What would we be
like
looking
a speculative
like
history picture?
What's that?
Like a speculative history picture?
Yeah. You know, I love hearing David talk about that story because, you know, I lived through it. I remember it as a child, but looking back in history now, it's like, we really screwed this up. And I mean, we being a humanity, Americans, if you will. And now we have to go through this rigmarole.
Nixon really screwed it up. I mean, such a movie, I think, would probably be mostly interesting to policy nerds like us, but you know, it is pretty fascinating when you dive into the details and the interplay of that. I mean, even you know, before and past, you know, all of the different legal challenges that have come up against not only the Controlled Substances Act, but even at the state level against certain prohibition policies. You know, it's really amazing that this edifice that is clearly harmful to the American people and clearly harmful to individuals and clearly harmful to liberty and you know, economic stability has managed to survive so many legal challenges over the years.
Well, how about the challenges within the federal government? You got the politicians saying pot is no good. And Nixon decides, I am going to put the final nail in the coffin on this thing. He gets marijuana policy is going to be handled by the Department of Justice and not the Health and Human Services. Then he says, we're going to put the final nail in the coffin. The former governor of Pennsylvania, Ray Shafer, wants an appointment to the federal bench. And Nixon says to him, I'm going to get you your appointment onto the federal bench. You're going to give me a study that is going to be exhaustive, and it is going to prove marijuana is the demon we say it is. The Shafer report came out a year later. They had a staff of 73 people. They went around the country, conducted like 50 studies, millions of dollars. It was such a big deal. It was turned into a book, kind of like what happened with the Mueller report. And what did he conclude? Ray Shafer said, marijuana is basically a joke. We shouldn't spend our time on it. It should not be rescheduled. It should be descheduled. And frankly, for casual sales between private parties, we should just ignore it. It's not a big deal. Nixon buried the report. Shafer never made it to the federal bench, and marijuana remained illegal to this day.
He didn't just bury the report. I mean, angrily threw it in the trash and was fuming about it.
Yeah.
I believe he took down the hippies and another term that I don't like to use. Anyway, that being said, we don't have to worry about that president anymore. We have enough dealing with what we've got to deal with now. What about the president himself, Joe Biden? I know that he knows everybody sees him as an anti-drug guy. And, is there room in his brain for compromise to move this forward? Do you think that exists?
I do. I mean, I honestly, he's clearly not going to spearhead this issue. He's not going to be an overt supporter of it. But given the popularity among both his party and among the American people, I don't see him vetoing a bill, particularly if it includes really robust social justice and restorative justice measures. Maybe he would repeal something that was passed by a Republican Congress, like the Joyce bill, which is a pretty stripped down descheduling bill. But in terms of something that came forward from his own party and was able to get enough votes from Republicans to actually show that the parties can compromise, I couldn't imagine him vetoing it.
Right. Restorative justice and expungement versus descheduling. Which is the one you could live with? That's not fair.
Well,
which is the more important?
In both cases.
What's that?
We need descheduling in both cases.
Right.
Rescheduling or simple states' rights allowances is not going to be enough. I mean, we absolutely need cannabis to be removed from the schedule of controlled substances so that it can be effectively regulated to whatever degree lawmakers really are willing to tolerate. But the real big sticking point is, what are we going to do to repair the harms caused by the last 40 years of the war on drugs, last 50 years, even going farther back? And that's something that Democrats are broadly supportive of. It's something that we are broadly supportive of. And if some bill comes across the desk of the president during his term that doesn't contain those, I could see some pushback and be like a conditional veto where I'm going to veto this unless you include X, Y, and Z. But for something that does include really robust measures along those lines, I don't see a veto in the cards.
I'm pretty sure that they put the jurisdiction over the cannabis legalization market into the Food and Drug Administration as opposed to the Justice. That seems to be a no-brainer to me.
Well, it's divided up in the draft language between the Food and Drug Administration, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, and the ATF. So the FDA and the TTB would be in charge of a lot of the regulatory stuff and being in charge of federal licensing and setting all the rules that help guide states, but also that in some cases states have to follow, or at least businesses operating in legal states have to follow. And then the ATF would apparently be in charge of everything outside of that license sphere. I haven't gotten a chance to get to the details of that particular section of the bill yet. I mean, as you said, it's like 160 pages and we're going line by line. But in the summary of the bill, the exact role of the ATF was not really effectively spelled out. So I think that's something that we're definitely going to be looking at, because we do want to minimize or eliminate the role of law enforcement in this area, unless absolutely necessary, or only under the most dire of circumstances, or in situations that are involving violence or organized crime. So it's going to be really important to make sure that the ATF has as small a role as possible when it comes to both enforcement as well as regulation.
Yeah, maybe they should just have a vice division and leave the Food Administration alone. Just saying, it might be a good time to blow up the bureaucracy and start over with all the vices that are out there.
Why should ATF have all the fun?
What's that?
Why should ATF have all the fun?
Right. Exactly. Hey, we blew right through 420, Morgan. So I appreciate you hanging out with us for a few extra minutes to talk about the seriousness of this, the historical perspective in it. And as always, we appreciate your regular contributions to this show. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me again.
All right. And since we are going to take our regular break a little bit later, we're going to continue to show excerpts from that news conference. And then when we come back, we're going to have a whole new panel, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the state of New Hampshire with a couple of very important political people in that state. We'll be back with more of the Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
This is a historic day that these two leaders are going to put their will and their work and all of their heart behind this justice bill. I had a press conference with families of children who had something called Gervais syndrome, which is seizures. The brave young girl sitting in a wheelchair had over, at times, 100 a day. And her mother was what you call a marijuana refugee because it was illegal in her state, so she moved to a state where marijuana had been legalized at the state level, but she talked about the fact that she was still violating federal law and that she could be prosecuted, that the person that was providing it could be prosecuted, that universities couldn't study marijuana to get the dosage right for her child. During that press conference, her child fell into a seizure. To this day, it's still one of the most moving moments of my Senate career. That we have criminalized Americans, and now some people, for trying to help their child, and now some people are probably wondering, well, oh, people aren't getting arrested anymore for possession of marijuana. Well, I'll tell you right now, I saw it when Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General and said he would restart prosecutions. I see it now in the facts all around our country. In 2019, there were more marijuana arrests than all other violent crime arrests combined. And the majority of those were for simple possession. This is a grievous reality. Lives are being destroyed every single day. And the hypocrisy of this is that right here in the Capitol, now people running for Congress, people running for Senate, people running for President of the United States readily admit that they've used marijuana. But we have children in this country, people all over this nation, our veterans, black and brown people, low-income people, now bearing the stain of having a criminal conviction for doing things that half of the last 4 presidents admitted to doing. We are in the midst of a grievous moment of injustice, and it is deep at the core of who we say we are, equal justice under law. And so we have waited too long. We've seen the disaster of prohibition once before in this nation. This is hurting every American, and I end with this fact. Law enforcement resources all over this country are desperately needed to solve crimes that are hurting other Americans, theft and larceny and assault, sexual assault, and other violence. But yet, instead, we have our precious resources being used to lock up majority black and brown people for doing things that presidents and congresspeople and senators have done. This bill is urgent. This bill is long past due. And I am proud that today we are making history by having the 2 champions on either side of me leading this fight to finally end the war on drugs, which, as Senator Schumer said, has been a war on people, to end prohibition once and for all for marijuana.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.